we're here in Keats's bedroom, where Browne invited him to stay for a year and a half before he set out to Rome, where he ultimately died of the tuberculosis, which he discovered in this room when he coughed up blood. As a doctor, he knew he was going to die. But a year after Keats died, Shelley drowned racing Leigh Hunt. Leigh Hunt was in his car. Shelley was in a boat he had retrofitted for him. The boat was called, by Byron, named it the Don Juan, or Don Juan, which was the name of Byron's epic poem on Don Juan, with whom he identified and with whom he was identified by, of course, his adoring public of young women. But Byron's boat was actually much larger. It was 36 feet, whereas Shelley's boat was 24 feet. So in order to catch Byron, Shelley had his boat retrofitted with 2 masts like a schooner, and it really was more of a ketch, so it shouldn't have had 2 masts. He had 3 jibs. He had 2 topsails on it. In other words, it was enormously top-heavy. It was enormously over-masted, oversailed. And so in order to compensate for that, he put on 2 tons of pig iron to the hull as ballast. So what this was basically a floating death trap waiting to wallow in the first high sea that it hit. When he had gone to Livorno, the weather was fine and he had no trouble with a 7-hour voyage. But coming back from Livorno with his friend Williams and the mate of the boat, a boy named Davies, the sea picked up and the waves grew large, and even though they were towing a dinghy behind them which survived and was found 2 months later floating completely untouched in the ocean by Italian fishermen, despite having that dinghy 10 feet behind the Don Juan, all 3 people on the boat drowned that day in the Gulf of Spezia near Pisa in Italy. The bodies were in the ocean for 10 days before they washed up on shore, at which point Shelley's friends decided to bury him, and Williams, and Davies, and they did, but learned later that because of Italian quarantine law, they actually had to burn them. So they dug them up, put them on a pyre, and set fire to them. Byron was so disgusted by it that he basically threw up and then went for a swim. His skin got so sunburned that it peeled off him in great slabs, which were saved by his girlfriend and which still exist today. Byron's skin. Of Shelley, very little remained but the spine of Keats's book Lamia, which Shelley had just received. It was Keats's last book, and Shelley was very excited to have it, and in saving it by putting it inside his jacket, it's the last thing he did before he was probably washed overboard. If he'd spent that time swimming for the dinghy, for the coracle, he could have lived, he could have survived. But instead he died really to save Keats, who was already dead. Very interesting. So basically his heart refused to burn. And Leigh Hunt took it out of the pyre, Shelley's heart, and handed it to Trelawney. And now Mary Shelley, who had been shivering during the funeral in her carriage and really wasn't there during the burning, had a big fight with Trelawney over getting that heart, and she kept it as long as she lived. So it was, everyone then took the carriage back into Pisa, had a drink. They were very rowdy, probably to compensate for the horror of the immolation of all three of the bodies which were unrecognizable. Byron said at the time it could have been a sheep because the bodies were unrecognizable, only recognized by the clothes they wore and by that one volume of Keats in Shelley's jacket.